How's it going, my confident bakers? I hope you're having a great day so far. Welcome back to another video. Today, I'll show you how to make a delicious savory tart. So let's get in the kitchen and see how it's done. Tarte or Soleil is a French appetizer made with puff pastry and sweet or savory fillings. It is made by sandwiching the filling between two discs of pastry. The pastry is then sliced and twisted to create this unique design which resembles a sun, hence the name, Sun Tart. It is usually made with store-bought puff pastry, but you already know we're making our own, because it will just turn out that much better. So let's get right to it, let's see what we need to make this. For the pastry, we'll need some white bread flour, yeast, salt, water, some butter for the dough itself, and 2 sticks of frozen butter for the buttery layers. They must be frozen because we'll need to grate them later on. When it comes to the filling, I chose goat's cheese, olives, and sun-dried tomatoes. I'll also use an egg for glazing and some seeds to sprinkle on top. When it comes to the equipment, we'll need a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, a temperature probe, a brush, a spatula for spreading out the filling. Now for baking, you can use a tray lined with some non-stick paper, it will work perfectly fine, but I will bake my tart on my pizza steel, so I'll use my paddle to slide it in the oven. We'll also need a rolling pin for rolling out the pastry, which I forgot to show you. Now the filling needs to be spreadable, ideally, so you want to chop your ingredients quite small. The beauty of this bake is that you can choose any filling that you like. Pesto and mozzarella, tomato sauce and cheese, peanut butter and jam, Nutella, and you can serve this tart with a dip too. As long as the ingredients for the filling are not too wet, it'll work. But if you are following my recipe, chop up your olives and the sun-dried tomatoes and then mix them with the goat's cheese and then leave the mix in the fridge for later. Okay, let's make the pastry. It all starts with temperature control. My kitchen was pretty warm at the time, around 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm using water that is slightly cooler. I don't want this dough to be too warm. Pour the water in the bowl, add the yeast and the salt, and then give them a quick mix. You want to dissolve the salt and yeast. Then add the butter, and finally add the flour. Grab your dough scraper and mix it to a dough. We're aiming for a final dough temperature of around 24 to 25 degrees Celsius, which is 75 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. If your dough turns out warmer, it'll ferment more rapidly. If it's cooler, it'll take longer. So you need to adjust the fermentation times accordingly. The first part of the bulk fermentation will be done at room temperature, but after that, it'll be up to you. You can ferment this pastry in the fridge or make it on the same day. I personally prefer cold fermentation, because I can make the pastry in the evening and finish it off on the next day. It is also easier to handle that way. Okay, after a quick temperature check, cover up the dough ball, leave it to ferment for 20 minutes. It is a relatively loose dough, so we will give it 2 folds during the first fermentation stage. Once the 20-minute timer is up, dust the dough ball with flour, pop it out on the table with the smooth side down, then stretch it and fold it over itself whilst going around in a circle. Once it feels nice and tight, flip it smooth side up again, tighten it against the table, and that's your fold done. Place the dough ball back into the bowl, cover it up and leave it to ferment for another 20 minutes. Once the timer is up, repeat the same steps as previously. Dust it with a little bit of flour, pop it out on the table, fold it over itself, tighten it and place it back into the bowl for another 20 minutes of fermentation. So a total of 1 hour has passed and the dough looks nice and puffy. We can now move on to creating some buttery layers. Give the dough ball a generous dusting of flour, pop it out on the table, flatten it with your hands and then roll it out with a rolling pin to a large rectangle. Don't worry about measurements, just roll it until it's nice and thin and try to make the edges as straight as you can. Okay, grab the first stick of butter from the freezer and grate it over 2/3 of the dough. Try to spread it out as evenly as possible. Use your dough scraper to clean up any stray pieces of butter from the table and drop them onto the dough. Now dust your hands with flour so the butter doesn't stick to them and then press the butter into the dough. Now grab the side which doesn't have any butter on it and fold it over. Try to make it as straight as possible. If need be, you can pull it and adjust it. Next up, grab the loose piece from the other side and fold that over and adjust it so it's nice and straight. And we have now created our first layers. Now the dough needs to be wrapped up and placed in the fridge to cool down for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes of chilling, pull it out the fridge to perform the second set of folds. We will now repeat the same steps as previously. So drop the dough out on the table, dust it generously with flour and roll it out to a large rectangle. Once you rolled it out to size and made the edges nice and straight, grab the second stick of butter from the freezer and once again grate it in an even layer over 2/3 of the dough. Then grab your dough scraper, pick up any stray pieces of butter from the table, place them onto the dough. Then flour your hands, press the butter into the dough, then pick up the 1/3 of dough which doesn't have any butter on it, fold it over, make sure it's nice and straight, and then fold over the loose piece of dough from the other side. We have a few layers in our dough already, but we need to create more. So from here, roll the dough out to a large rectangle again and fold it into 3 layers once more, but this time without any butter, and repeat it one more time. And now the dough has turned into pastry, with plenty of buttery layers inside. But before we can use it, we need to chill it down one more time. So wrap it up and pop it in the fridge for at least 1 hour. But I like to make mine in the evening and finish it on the next day, so I will leave it in the fridge for around 18 to 24 hours. Alright, it's the next day, we can move on to final shaping. This time we need to roll the pastry out to a huge rectangle. It should be around 48 by 24 centimeters, which is 20 inches by 10 inches. We will need some sort of template for cutting out the 2 discs of pastry. Something that is 10 to 11 inches across. A large bowl or a lid from a large pot should do the job. Make sure you can fit 2 of those on your pastry, and then trace around the edge with a sharp knife. If you're going to do it on the table like I am, don't press too hard, you don't want to scratch the table too much. Remove the trimmings, but don't throw them away, because they will be used for making another tart. Okay, let's move on to finishing this one. Place one of the pieces of pastry on a piece of non-stick baking paper. Then dot about 3/4 of the filling on top of it. Now grab your spatula and spread it out in a nice even layer. It would be a good idea to leave the filling out at room temperature for a while to make it more easily spreadable. Once you have managed to spread the filling all over the surface, grab the second disc of pastry and lay it over the first one, ensuring that all the edges meet up. Now take something like a ramekin or cup and place it in the center of the pastry and make an indentation. And then place cuts in the pastry, beginning from the edge of the indentation. First do 4 cuts in a cross pattern, then cut each section in half, and finally cut each half in half again, and you will end up with 16 strips of pastry. Now pick up the end of each strip and give it a full 360-degree twist. Now let's cover this bad boy up and leave it for the final proof. At around 23 degrees Celsius or 73 degrees Fahrenheit, it took me about an hour and a half. During the final hour of fermentation, you want to preheat your oven to 190 Celsius, 375 Fahrenheit, fan on, and that'll be 210 degrees Celsius or 410 Fahrenheit, fan off. If you're using baking steel like I am, preheat that too. I wanted to get the most out of my egg glaze, so I decided to use the double glazing technique. I brushed the pastry once, left it to dry for 5 minutes and then brushed it again. This will create a super rich and beautiful crust. If you're wondering how I made that mini tart, it's pretty straightforward. I squished the pastry together, then rolled it out, sliced out 2 discs and filled it up the same way as the big one. There were a few trimmings left over, but not much. After glazing your tarts for the second time, sprinkle them with seeds. And again, you can use any seeds that you want. I had some linseeds in the cupboard, so that's what I used. Well, let's get this thing in the oven. It'll take around 25 minutes to fully bake. And whilst this one is baking, I've placed a smaller one in the fridge so it doesn't overproof. Bake your tart until you are happy with the color of the crust. Once it's beautifully golden brown all over, you know it's ready. And there you have it. That's how you make a giant sun tart. It is very impressive looking, but it's so simple to make. Even though the second tart is quite a bit smaller, it took about the same time to fully bake. It didn't turn out quite as beautiful as the big one though. But of course the good thing is that they both taste the same. I was pleasantly surprised with the result. I had never made something like this. Once again, it goes to show you that it's worth learning how to make this pastry. It works so well both in sweet and savory applications, and I have already published several recipes using it. So if you're into this kind of thing, head over to the pastry playlist. You'll find recipes there for pain au chocolat, pain au raisin, chocolate twists, cheesy pinwheels, and there is no doubt that I'll be making more in the future. So what do you think of this recipe? And have you tried any of my other recipes using this pastry? Let me know down in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this one, click over here. Subscribe to the channel, click right here. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.